make sure you put your gasket on the correct facing way, and make sure you have both dowel pins set up in the engine. Just set the head on both dowel pins. It shouldn't wiggle around after you have it set correctly. Make sure you don't drag it across the dowels. It can scratch it and it can create a leak. So when you remove the head, you'll realize that you actually have to take your camshafts out to get to these head bolts. So when you install it, you're going to have to do the same thing. Sometimes a machine shop will put them back in after they're doing a valve grind. So you have to take the cams out, make sure you keep them in the correct order, make sure you keep your cam caps in the correct order, facing the same direction. Alright, so in your head studs, make sure you use lubrication, usually just a 30 weight. If you have ARP head studs, they come with their own lubricant. Make sure you have your washer on your bolt. Also make sure before you reuse bolts, the tolerances from the base of the base of the bolt to the end can only be 4.125 inches. If it's anything longer than that, you're going to want to replace your stud or your bolt there. You can just slide that down, make sure the washer stays in the right location, and you're ready to torque them down. What you're going to do first is you're going to make sure you torque it in the correct order. You start from the center and rotate clockwise. You start at the top cylinder. You're going to torque it down to 16.5 foot-pounds. And then you're going to go around the whole thing in order, and once you get around the whole thing, you'll go do 290 degree turns. For this next step, you're going to want to mark an edge on the bolt. Right there you can see it in red on the very top end from my view, and you're going to turn it 90 degrees. You have give or take 5 degrees on that, so you can pretty much eyeball it. Once you get it set, turn it 90 degrees, double check that it's actually rotated a full 90 degrees. That looks just about perfect. You're going to want to do that to the rest of the bolts as well in the same order we talked about earlier. Okay, after you go around the full sequence once, you're actually going to go through and do it again. You're going to do another 90 degrees. So after doing it again, it'll be a total of another 180 degrees. So you'll take that and you'll turn it another 90. When you're putting your camshafts back in, make sure that you have lubricant of some kind. Some people use oil. I use the assembly lube. You're also, because your valve cover gasket isn't going to be able to seal up right here, you're going to put some silicone. I use the right stuff is what it's called. It's my personal silicone of choice for this. You just want to add a little bit on both sides to make sure that your head won't be leaking oil. Another thing when you're putting in the camshafts, you're going to want to rotate the camshaft slowly until it's sitting flush. There's pretty much only 2 points this way and 180 degrees the other way that'll actually sit flush. The reason you want to do that is if you tighten it down while it's having one valve pushed down, that will mess up the thrust clearances on the camshaft. So make sure that it's completely flush before you put on your assembly lube or oil and tighten down your cam caps. When you're tightening down your camshafts, make sure they're flush. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And then start at number 3 and go clockwise again. So you're going to go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And you're going to torque all those to 100 inch-pounds. Okay, on this particular Mazda, this is the MazdaSpeed Protege, so it's turboed. On the intake manifold gasket, we're actually going to spray with some copper coat gasket spray. We actually do this on almost every intake manifold gasket we do, but specifically this one, because it's boosted, we want to make sure we spray this down pretty good. You'll want to do the front and back of it before you put it on. Once your copper gasket's sprayed down, or once your intake manifold gasket is sprayed with the copper coat, you want to put it on. You want to put it down while it's still tacky, not dry. Once you get the intake manifold on, you're going to want to do the exhaust manifold. Make sure you put your new gasket in there, and then you should be able to just slide this one on the 2 posts that are already there. Sometimes things get in the way. Once tightened and down, just throw a nut on it so it won't come off. Next, you want to put on your water housing. There's going to be 4 bolts. Make sure you put the gasket back in there. This is also one of those gaskets we like to copper coat. But yeah, there's 2 on pop and 2 underneath. Okay, when you're doing the timing belt, you're going to line up the the lower cam sprocket, or the lower crank sprocket, with the little timing mark right here. So the piece right there lines up with that one right there, and that means you're at top dead center in cylinder number 1. Your top cam sprockets are going to want to line up. You want to line up the E on the exhaust side and the I on the intake side. There's a little line right there and right there. And what I do is I take a small flat, like I have a zip tie here, lay it across so that I know that it's flat and even. Pull it over to this side, and it shows that I am half a tooth off there. So when I put the timing belt on, I'll actually rotate this cam sprocket, and this one right there, it looks like it's also half a tooth off. But that way that I know that I'm even and that these two are facing each other. Once you have the timing marks lined up, you can also check from the back. So those lines are marked up, or marks are lined up, and if you come down here, let's see if you can see that, those marks are lined up as well. Once those are lined up, then you're going to take your tensioner that's down on the side here and hook the spring up to that pin that sticks out. Once you have the timing belt on and the tensioner hooked up, what you're going to do is you're going to rotate the engine around 2 full rotations on the crankshaft. You're going to rotate it twice because the crankshaft will turn twice for every one time the camshaft goes around. So there was 1. And here comes 2. Right. Once you go around 2 full rotations, come back to the back again and double check your timing marks. After you finish doing the timing, you're going to put on your lower timing cover. There's going to be 4 bolts that secure it. After you have the lower timing cover installed, you're going to install this washer. It's not really a washer, it's like a spacer. It holds the timing belt in place. Line it up with the keyway on the crankshaft and slide it in. And then you will take your crank pulley and line it up with that same keyway and slide it in place. After you put on the crank pulley, go ahead and put in the upper timing cover. There's going to be 4 bolts to secure this. Make sure you put your dipstick tube on that one, and on the lower one right there next to your water pump. That one's going to have a bracket with a wiring harness that attaches to it also. Go ahead and mount this. Go ahead and put this mount back on. There's 3 bolts that secure it on, 14 millimeters, and then make sure your wire's out of the way. Pull that up and slide the bolt and the bracket back in there. You should be able to screw in to the backside nut here. Next, you're going to put the water pump pulley on. Make sure you put it on with the F facing outwards. So put the water pump pulley on finger tight, and then put on the small inner belt. So it's a thinner belt. It's going to go on the inside of the pulley, of the crank pulley, and it's going to go around the alternator and the water pump. And then you're going to tighten it up right here using the bracket on the alternator. If you can see that or not. So you're going to tighten this up, and then once it's tight, you're going to tighten this up, and it'll lock it in place. So to make sure your belt's tight, like right now it's really loose. So I'm going to keep tightening it down some. Once you have the inner belt tightened up, go ahead and put on the outer belt. It's going to be the larger, wider belt. It's going to go around the crank pulley, the AC compressor, and the power steering pump. You're going to tighten it down in a similar fashion. Underneath the power steering pump, you'll find a similar bracket as one that's on the alternator. You'll tighten down the end, and then you'll tighten down the side to lock it in place. You're going to tighten up the valve cover bolts after you get the both belts on. You're going to put the valve cover on. Make sure you put on either a new gasket or make sure your gasket's in good shape. If you're putting on a new gasket, make sure you get all these in. You're going to do the same thing, the clockwise pattern. You're going to start on the outside upper corner. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and that's the order you're going to tighten them down in. Valve cover's bolted down. Go ahead and put in the cam angle sensor here. Tighten down that 110 millimeter bolt. Once you get the valve cover on and everything, put your cam angle sensor in here. Go ahead and put on the whole wiring harness. You should be able to just pull it over. Just plug everything back in where you unplugged it from.